Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday Gathering at the Storehouse. Glad to have you with us again. Tony's with me today. Good morning, Tony.
Morning, Dan.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Middle East and the happenings over the past week. What have you learned, Tony?
Well, the war is on everywhere. Yemen, they started a war there by, giving the rebels there, baiting them in. The same thing we were talking about last night with Afghanistan in the 80s. You know, the same banks loaned the money for the weapons to be bought. So when Russia decided to invade Afghanistan in the 80s, where'd the government get the money? How'd they substantiate that? What did they think they were going to get? You know, I imagine the poppy fields. That's what we've got now in Afghanistan. And also gas, natural gas pipelines that are in Afghanistan, right? So what was the push to go into Afghanistan but one that the bankers would make over resources? So Russia had to borrow money to build weapons to send their military in there, not knowing that they would be resisted? No one saw that coming? I don't buy that. Every conflict since World War I has been funded by the same group of bankers, funding both sides. They funded the Bolshevik Revolution because you can't have eventually Christians killing Christians. They might work it out. But if you got atheists and Christians, well, you got a reason for both sides to keep fighting forever. So they created that side and funded that side, which means somebody up the strings of command that no one ever talks about. The string pullers that own the banks, essentially, that own all that real estate that people talk about being in the hands of such a small group. That group that meet periodically in trilateral commissions or Bilderberg groups or CFR meetings or whatever to get together and discuss what the next best thing is for their money. When a war needs to be fought, how many weapons need to be built, how many casualties they're expecting, what the result is, what sort of resources is that. So these people now, they need to figure out what the net worth of all the war is. And if you don't understand that war is good business, I mean, again, go back to World War I and Smedley Butler, and war's a racket. You could see who was paying for it and who was benefiting from it. And he wrote a book about it. The industrialists, they pay for it, they benefit from it. So what we have going on in the Middle East right now is war. And I was just listening to someone that I think put their finger on it pretty well. That this Arab Spring was the instigation to start destabilizing the region. This most recent push. We're still living in this Arab Spring influx of money that got the whole thing started to destabilize, that started the toppling, or the reason to topple, the excuse to start coming into this region, right? To spread democracy, as always, because that's what we got to fight. So that whole idea that there even is something to fight, this is something anyone that has any kind of religious heart, Christian or otherwise, I mean, you're not going to find it in your scripture. There is no justification for war. You're supposed to love your enemies. You're supposed to fix your problems non-violently. There just is no excuse to keep perpetuating war and praying to God that He's on the troops' side. He's on every troop's side, obviously. What God wants is us to stop sending our kids to kill each other for the gains of these rich people that pay for it all, because that's what it comes down to. And that's World War I, that's World War II, that's Auschwitz, and the whole German concentration camps were labor camps. They weren't just to kill Jews. The extermination with the Jews was the byproduct of using their lifeblood as slave labor for the industrialists like Carnegie and Harriman and Bush and Herbert Walker and Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller, all the people that were funding it and had their, Rockefeller was sending their oil for Hitler's planes and trucks. Henry Ford built his trucks. So, this interconnectedness. So what's going on in the Middle East? Man, they've unleashed war when they could have unleashed peace. That's what you got to see. We are not fighting terrorism. We are terrorism in order to bring about war. And we're bringing it about. And we're quite successfully now have that world ready to, like a tinderbox now, civil war. That's what we appear to be after. And it's got Assad's regime and the strength of the people that are behind him, the Iranian cultural ingrained strength of Persia that's supporting Assad and that's been there for 40 years. That's the last domino that has to fall before it's out and out civil war, where we're the bankers are feeding both sides. Shias, yeah, all the guns you want. Sunnis, yeah, you got to defend yourself. So we got both sides covered. We got an argument for both sides. Whoever we blame it on, whether Russia supplies the guns or whether we supply the guns, whether Israel supplies the guns, Saudi Arabia supplies the guns. Come on, it's only so many people that make the guns. And there's such a thing as the United Nations run by America who can go put sanctions on you and kill millions of your people. They can stop you from using whatever guns they want to stop you from using, if that were the case. If you happen to be really using guns or supplying guns to the wrong people. You saw what happened to Russia in the 80s. And of course that was all orchestrated. The whole Charlie Wilson's wars, glorification of what was obviously a CIA plot all along to genocidally murder hundreds of thousands, if not more, Afghanis, because they were, one of the real old indigenous races who has a right to that land and a sort of a religious heritage that goes back too far to just convert into your industrialist model. They're not going to do it. So, like the American Indians, the Native Americans, they're not going to convert. They're not going to start buying from the railroad companies, and they're not going to live that lifestyle. They want freedom. They want to roam and have their buffalo and all that land that now was useful to the industrialists. So they were murdered, genocidally eradicated. And if you look at history, that is history. That's modern history. That's what these bankers have done. So what's going on in the Middle East? They are preparing for war by disrupting every region where there is any stability. Apparently Yemen was stable enough, and so now it's not. Now you've got death of who? These Houthi rebels. Who are they? Oh, they're the indigenous people from one little area of the country. But you can't have them alive because they're not going to go for this new secular world that they're setting up after the war. They're not going to go for the secular demands on their country in preparation for the war. They're going to say, well, wait a minute, we don't vote for that. We don't want that. So you can't have those voices, especially if they're voices that have any sort of potential for power. So that's what's going on, and this proxy war that we use, ISIS now, I think we talked about it last week, the most intelligent or informed way to look at what's going on seems to be to recognize that this year we're most likely taking our shot at getting Syria out of there because it's expensive. War, it's not that it's expensive in the sense that it can't go on forever for the people funding it. They're making a fortune. but it can't be presented to the public. You can't carry on the emotion forever. People do get tired of it. So you have to go through periods of war and periods of quote-unquote peace, the benefits of the war.
Well, I think one of the things that's holding Syria up is this talks with Iran, because Syria has to be a very large topic when you're talking to Iran as to what the outcome of Syria is going to be. What the outcome of Assad is going to be is part of Iran's business, really.
Yeah, but when you say talks with Iran, what are we referring to? I'm not thinking of anything you might see in the newspaper about nuclear weapons. That's all absurd.
Well, that's why I'm saying Iran, and the topic has got to be, part of it's got to be Syria.
Well, but the topic has got to be just butt out. I mean, and they've got to be saying, yeah, but no, how can we butt out? And so we've had sanctions on Iran that have crippled their economy and cost so much life. See, that's what you have to realize. The people that pull those strings cost these people their lives, and they have families. They see their people dying. And they say, man, oh man, these son of a guns. That's how they're going to be drawn into it at some point, I think. You create that sort of hatred, that sort of angst through all this. Why else? I mean, the Fabians showed it from 100 years ago. That's what they've been doing to us. Kill them with kindness and welfare. Steal all their money, but go in and tell them how much you love them and understand how much it hurts. Let me hold your hand. Here, let me give you a sandwich. You hungry? I know, it sucks. Here, it's okay. Here, I know. You don't have the bed you used to have. I know. You don't have the freedom you used to have. I know. You don't have the health care you used to have. I know. You don't have the future you used to have. But look, here, we got a cot over here for you. Here's a warm bowl of soup. Look, come on. People still love you. You're okay. That's the Fabian way. Over time, you change everything, not through trying to strong arm people, because they'll resist. You love them into their new condition slowly. So why aren't we doing that over there? We're not doing that over there. It's all about weapons, selling weapons, killing people. See? Because those are people we want dead. Any of those righteous Muslims, old indigenous peoples with some religious notion left in their head, they got to be killed because they're not going to convert. So they have to be reduced like they did with the Orthodox Christians, like they've done with the Orthodox Jews, like they've been doing, I suppose, the best they can over there with all these regimes we've been installing. Think how hard it is. That's what I said. That's the last bastion of people that actually live a religious life. They bow to God 5 times a day. They don't drink. They stone their daughter for adultery. Some of them, apparently. They really believe, in this invisible God and this invisible law. So, you can't talk to people like that. You can't get them to buy useless crap just because you're selling it, and you elect somebody president that's wearing a turban like them. They see through that, just like the church was supposed to in America. And why they become the Laodicean church, married to government, yoked light to darkness, so you can't even tell either of them apart, lukewarm. But the Muslim world, I imagine, was still quite divided, at least when we got our hands into it in the 50s. The Shah, and then Mubarak, and then Saddam Hussein, the PLO, Yasser Arafat, our boy over there on that side, lob bombs at Israel so we could justify constant military buildup in that region. It's our MO. Show me a real history that adds up. Where's the money coming from your history of all these good old boys just trying to fight communism? Really? Where'd the communists get the money? Show me the money. You can see who backed them. Originally it was the Vatican, the Jesuits, the Vatican bankers and their minions in the world backed the Bolshevik Revolution and provided the money for Lenin to start genocidally killing Orthodox Christians in Russia. This is true history. This wasn't some popular revolution. That's bull. The popular crowd was the Orthodox crowd that was in power, that had the money and the resources of the country already. How'd they get usurped? Like all revolutions, it was backed by bankers. Well, who backed it? You know? Vatican bankers, ultimately. Same people that were backing the American Revolution. Same people that backed the American Civil War. Same people that backed the First World War, Second World War, and now Third World War. So come on, the MO's clear. What's going on now? It's easy if you do a little research to just, wade through the BS, because that's what you've got coming, and put together like a detective the forensic evidence. What's really left behind at the crime scene? What's the history? Who's pulling the strings? Where's the money that pays for all this? And so you see that it's this coalition of Zionists working for the bankers, setting up Israel ever since World War I with the Balfour Declaration, to say that Britain had a mandate, to such a strong degree that they were willing to backstab the Hashemite Arabs that they made the deal with to help them fight the Ottomans. And then come in a week after, saying, yeah, you're right, we had a deal, it's your caliphate, there you go. And a week later come in and said, oops, but by the way, we can't give it to you yet because we promised it to France, so it's theirs. And France put the regime that we're now uprooting, called Bashar Assad, in place, following all that mess. But it resulted in the Balfour Declaration that basically told those Arabs, hey, England's got plans for this land. And then within 30 years, and we're just going to give this back to Israel. Now that we've paid to have Hitler slaughter all the Orthodox Jews, put them to work, give us back the money we paid, pennies on the dollar we spent for what? Some bricks and some German soldiers to build these giant edifices of labor camps, and then had free labor as we rounded up. All it cost was the meals and the pay for the soldiers and the propaganda machine to round up this labor from all over Europe, have it trained in, trucked in, and work it till it died. Meanwhile, all the medical experiments we get to perform, all of that sort of benefit to the superior race at the expense of a race that was doomed anyway. Yeah, that was a beautiful time in history. Funded by who? Adolf Hitler? No, he was funded by the Vatican banks through the European banks, and supported completely by the American industrialists in every way. There would have been no World War II or Adolf Hitler without people like E.F. Harriman, George Bush, Herbert Walker, Prescott Bush, George Bush's father, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, all the people that own our country and our political system and our banking system. Those people. So what are they doing? Stop imagining it's terrorist Muslims that are doing it to us. They're using Muslims to do this to us. They're the ones that are creating these Muslim terrorists to use as tools. And that doesn't mean that many of these people that they're using are not indoctrinated into some horrible cause. Just like our poor boys and girls are indoctrinated into our military, thinking they're out saving the world. They're not told they're doing the bidding. They're not allowed to read Smedley's book. I'll bet that doesn't come through their military training. Read about war being a racket and who you're really working for. They don't know that. They're being indoctrinated into this fight for freedom. and being given this false narrative of history of a World War I atheism and communism, World War II fascism and the evil of Hitler, and now the modern extension of that is this worldwide terror against the freedoms of America. I mean, that's just not true in history. Nobody else in the world believes it. Everybody knows we dropped our own buildings. Everybody knows America is just a bank and warmongering country, because all of that history now has come out. We're the only ones that have to swallow the propaganda. Other countries don't have to take it. Only our country has to have it on our TV 24 hours a day and can't say the words radiation about Fukushima, can't say the words inside job about 9/11, can't say the words, Congress bought and paid for. They just can't expose that in our media. But they can in other countries, and they have. And so everybody else in the world is quite familiar with our game now. We don't produce anything. This idea that our economy's getting better, that our mainstream is telling us, how do you figure that? We got less people participating in the workforce than we have in almost 40 years now. We're at 40-year low of the number of people participating in the workforce. And they're talking about unemployment is at a low. It's only at a low because all those people are now off the unemployment list. And there's so few that still get on unemployment that it looks like unemployment's low. But the fact is the amount of people at work are so low that retail numbers are at all-time lows, that stores are laying off at all-time lows, that GDP is non-existent except in these ridiculous financial products that amount to these high-frequency trades of currencies and other market manipulating indexes, driving the price of food up or temporarily up and down so that they can make money off their programmed manipulation. I mean, this is what shows up as our gross national product. This is what American economy is based on. It's absurd when you look at the true numbers. Banks, these central banks, these large national banks that borrow the money from the central banks at zero interest, are buying up the mortgages by the hundreds and thousands of homes. That's what keeps the real estate market looking like it exists. Oh, home sales are up. Yeah, because 6 bankers bought up all that property at half of what it was worth in 2008 when everybody lost their butt on it. When all the individuals who are now out of the workforce, working part-time when they used to work full-time, having less coming in, but spending more for things like gas and corn and electricity and rent. Yeah, all the indicators are just in, what they really feel like to the people, and yet the propaganda machine in America would make you think we're such a great and strong country. So, what's going on in the Middle East is it's being prepared for the war that I imagine is supposed to save America, in the way World War II came along and saved us from that long, drawn-out depressionary period. Got everybody back to work for a common cause. And so it would appear that something like that is what's on the forefront, because we know that it amounts in a 7-year covenant that ends in 3.5 years of out-and-out warfare. He goes against Egypt. He goes against the north, Syria or Turkey probably is what they're talking about there. Tidings from the east. I mean, is that China? Is it Iran? I mean, either way. Afghanistan, we know from their own Quranic prophecies, comes in the end. All these territories wind up at war. And so that's what's setting up right now, this civil war that's coming. And from one of their most prominent Islamic eschatological teachers, he says that the fall of Syria will result in this Sunni-Shia civil war, that's what the West is pushing. because that's what will bring the need for us to get involved, the UN to get involved, to start carving up these territories, putting our puppet dictators in place so that there's no longer any more challenge to anything these bankers want to do, because each of these puppet dictators will put a Western central bank system in place, and all of the leaders from then on out will always follow that, because any dissension will be now handled on this international United Nations level, because that's what it took to settle the Civil War, see? The UN had to come in there and do something, and so now, of course, they'll have this final say in security matters, which will mean everybody will be on the central banking system. See, this has got to be our final play for saving the dollar, and why they can keep scaring everybody right now with the economy's going to collapse, because they know, no, it's not. It's going to boom. It's going to boom, because we're going to go to war and kill us millions of Muslims, and that costs lots of money and weapons that we get to spend in our economy because we make weapons. And at that same time, we're going to have all these programs now that we're going to put people back to work to get them behind the war effort, to get them, everybody, all in the patriotic union of fighting terrorism once and for all, and getting a job out of it. I mean, I see that's got to be their plan. See, that puts down all the naysayers. And what have the naysayers been doing besides scaring people? Getting people to sell off their property, once it goes down, which it will now, because the scare is going to keep coming before the war saves it. That's what you can see from history. They're never going to let it fall completely. They're not going to let Germany happen again with hyperinflation. They don't need to do that. That doesn't really help them steal the assets, because it puts the workforce out of work, puts the slaves out of work when they've already got the slaves perfectly where they want them. They're in debt. They're completely bowing to a fascist system. They will be drawn around like cattle with a ring in their nose. Up, we're going to war. Okay. Up, we're going to peace. Okay. Up, we're giving up our rights. Okay. Up, we're standing in line for vaccines. Okay. They'll do anything they want. They've got a perfect system. The people are tuned in, plugged in, brain dead, brainwashed. They will ignore the entire world telling them the facts and keep parroting the official story. Why would you disrupt that? No, just keep scaring them, and then give them a little. Oh, thank you. Oh, they saved us. Right? So I think that's the way it's going to come at Americans. It's not going to all go down right now. It's going to go down in the second 3.5 years, when everybody goes to war and stuff really starts blowing up, and you can justify now this wiping out of population, because now your government is trusting you. Oh, please come and save us. Oh yeah, here we are. Here. Yeah, okay, you get this, you get the blue vaccine. Let me see your passport. Oh, you get the red vaccine. Go stand in that line. Whatever. By then you'll be begging for everything they're given. It won't be a draconian antichrist government. That's why they're scaring everybody with that. That's never going to happen the way they're presenting it. Otherwise, they don't present it that way.
Well, the first place to see the government of America is not the Antichrist. And so...
Yeah, but it represents that Babylon system.
It represents that.
And that is going to fall at that 3.5 year, in that time period, right when everybody's counting on it, see? Right, when that war machine's rolling and peace and, boom, it's going to come to nothing in a day. No more money. It is going to finally crash. What's going to bring that about? The speculators out there that I've been watching, you'd think that because the bankers are already funding this other system through China and Russia, that's where they're going to start it over. And it's okay, because for them, there's no national sovereignty. They're not attached to being American. Americans are just slaves from that country. You know, they're not letting anybody in on the inside group of the people who do the funding. You know, they're just using different resources at different times to serve their purposes. And the purpose that you have to get behind is that they're trying to set up Israel themselves. God's not going to do it. They're going to do it. They've had the plan for 100 years. And they're in the process of fulfilling their own plan of putting Israel back in there and having the ruling power coming out of Israel over there, not out of Islam or any Muslim nations. So Islam's being set up just like Russia was in '84, just like Al-Qaeda was, just like Panama was, just like everybody that America deals with. Everybody's just a pawn. You know, they're another slave state. Saudi Arabia is going to be cut loose in the end, it looks like. Egypt. You know, all these places serve their purpose for us. Afghanistan, look at the proof. We had to fund the poor Afghanistan people because those horrible communist Russians were slaughtering them. Why? Who told them to go slaughter the Afghanistan? Why'd they have to slaughter those people? What was the play there? To just get the rest of the world PO'd? What was the real Russian impetus to go into Afghanistan and just start slaughtering people that you had no war against? They couldn't fight back. You didn't need to roll over them with tanks and slaughter them mercilessly. Why was that done like that? Just like the Bolshevik Revolution, funny enough. An obvious offense that had to bring about a response. Right? The Hegelian dialectic. So, when I look at it, I think, why would you do that just to bring about a response? And it did. And it brought about the appropriate response was to bring those weapons, put them in the Afghans' hands, let them fight back with all of our modern weapons, and in fact, pulverize Russia, because of course it had nothing to do with Afghan people or Russian people. It was just weapons blowing up other weapons in sufficient numbers that any strategist, could work out in a matter of a weekend with a think tank, sitting around examining the geography of it and the logistics and how many of this will it take to destroy, how much of that once they put that into effect. And what did they do that with? American taxpayer money, covertly. That's what's behind the whole Charlie Wilson's war, to glorify the conversion of $1 billion or more U.S. tax dollars into weapons to put into the hands of Afghanis to fight the horrible Russians, when of course all we had to do, like throughout the Cold War, was tell Russia, hey, do you really want us to come and destroy all your property and all of these soldiers? Because we can, we could do it through the Afghanis. We could have got Russia to pull back simply by telling them this, but somebody gave them the go-ahead to go in there. Just like Pearl Harbor, right? Just like all the false flag wars. So same thing, ISIS is being given the guns and the money to go in there and create this civil war, so that then the UN can be called out and we can really send in the weapons and start killing wholesale everybody on both sides, because they're both bad now. They're both extremists. They're all terrorists now. They're terrorizing each other. That's how horrible it will get. And of course Israel will be threatened. Something will either happen in Israel, they'll launch weapons at Israel, they'll make threats against Israel, and it'll have to get so bad that the Hashemite king will have to rise up and say, hey, I've got to stop this slaughter of my people. And he'll be given this crown of honor. to go conquering and to conquer. That's what we're watching for. And so what do I see in the Middle East but the real-time setup for this moment to be a necessity?
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
And the Druze are becoming more and more, feeling more and more threatened all the time, more and more surrounded all the time.
Well, that's all a story. It's never really been true when you look at it. They've been the nuclear power over there. We've been disrupting it from the 1917 when we took it away from the Hashemites, Balfour Declaration. Then we start manipulating in the 40s through the Arabs, the Saudi Arabians, setting them up, 40s and 50s with the king of the Saudis and getting the Wahhabis going over there for us. And then on into the 50s with the Shah of Iran. So our hands have been manipulating that area our entire history with them. That's nothing new. Mm-hmm. It's just that they have been a cohesive enough group of people through their religion, because they're a theocracy for the most part. And what we've done is gone in there to disrupt their theocracy and turn it into, as much as we possibly can, some sort of, how would you say, oligarchy of Muslim interests, some sort of fascist oligarchy in our own that are sensitive to the views of the West, people that are willing to have their family in power as long as they'll make concessions to Western powers, so that they can have as much of their theocracy as they're able to maintain within those parameters, right? So a secularized theocracy is what we've been creating over there for decades in order to try and control them and set them up for this final conflagration. And you can see that coming to be now, because we're disrupting all the power centers that we had previously paid for, as Hillary Clinton said to the Congress at one point. All these people we're fighting today are people we funded 20 years ago, in her own little, mouthpiece statement. And so, of course, that's true. So that's why John McCain can talk every time he's on television. He talks about, I know this opposition leaders intimately. We speak with them all the time. John McCain knows the Muslim opposition leaders of Yemen, of Iran, of Syria, the people accused of using sarin gas and all this. He knows them intimately. What are they talking to John McCain about? Right. He knows them intimately, all right. So it's, the whole story's absurd if you get it from the Western media at all. That includes Al Jazeera, Al Monitor, any of the mouthpieces for the West. You got to read between the lines what's really going on. Bankers are moving their plan into our reality, our World War III reality, where they bring about a huge war in that area so that it can result in them wiping out everybody that might resist this establishment of a new secular Middle East, with Israel the undisputed ruler of Jerusalem, and all of the secular governments of what's left of the Muslim world all adhering to that. And so I think they've always known that's going to take, the annihilation of the Persians, the annihilation of what's left of Assad and the regime that's been there for decades, all the people. We didn't kill all those people of Iraq for nothing, and we didn't leave it in Saddam Hussein's hands to do for nothing. He was our boy. The only reason he knew he got to, I'm sure we strung him along through all those years of sanctions. He didn't starve, Certain people in his country starved to death, and you can bet they were the people who we were aiming to kill all along. So You really need to get your mind around that if you're going to understand how this end time 7-year covenant comes about, who it's with, why it results in Armageddon, and how the Jews set themselves up for such destruction. Because they claim a false Messiah at this time. Mm-hmm. While all this is coming, they're still joined at the hip in all this. In this murder. In this commitment to murder. In the name of future restoration of whether they've got aspirations to do it for God, just like the nutball Christians in America that think they can support this war for Jesus. Mm-hmm. Jesus is over there supporting us, killing our Muslim brothers and sisters just because they're reportedly terrorists. So that gives us a right to kill them, huh? Find me that in anything Jesus says. Anything. Find me one word in your New Testament that supports you as a Christian supporting the killing of anyone, let alone someone that you know is being propagandized and supported and has a history of being a product of your own government that's doing the propaganda to you. I mean, you're just willingly blind, following the blind, and causing the evil in the world. And so this is the moment that's so utterly evil. The times that are evil, the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit of false deliverer, because the true deliverer is love and selflessness, not war, not againstness and the power of one God or one good to kill all evil. No, God kills with the sword that comes out of his mouth, his word, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Bless those who persecute you. Right? So, how do you reconcile that? When do we do that? Oh, after we kill everybody, then we can love our enemy, because it'll be all just the Christians. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, all of this support of war is a lie. And so Christians have absolutely no right to support this war whatsoever, whether you recognize it as a fallacy or not. The fact that it is nothing but historical false flag, nothing but an evil scheme to use our military might to genocidally murder those that don't want our banking manipulation of life. I mean, they don't want our way of life is the problem. And our way of life centers around our banks, funny enough. The very thing the scripture says can't serve both God and money. And so our Western life revolves, of course, around serving money. Theirs, for 1,000 years or more, has revolved around serving their God on a popular level, on a theocratic level. They've used their scripture and their concept of serving God as their primary motivator, even in a political spectrum, where we've used just the opposite, our secular motivation of money and wealth and the creation of wealth and the creation of material progress. That's our motivator, not whether, we're doing what God would want us to do. That's your business in private. But in the public, in the secular world, in the political world, we do what brings money. Oh, okay.
And they brought the religions right into
Well, that's why. So pretend now that I can actually serve God and serve my government. That's the whole purpose of separation of church and state, because, you can't serve both God and money. And if government is to run on the premise that money is first and God is simply an afterthought, how are you going to get people to serve that purpose if their concept is that God is first? So you got to take that out of the equation. No, you separate church and state and you do it like it's a big favor to them. Now everybody can worship the way they want to. Well, that was already built into Christianity. You're not allowed to judge anybody to begin with. So you got to love your enemy. You got to bless those who curse you. So I don't see where you got the opportunity to take away anybody's religious freedom just because you were going to bind your political scope by your religious freedom. In other words, because we believe in God, well, then we can't go to war with other countries offensively. We can't go steal other people's resources and take away their freedoms in the name of our freedoms. These are things we can't do religiously. But when you separate religion from state, well, of course, now you can do whatever you want. And the people, well, you can't stop us. You can go home and pray any way you want. But your taxes, your participation in the state is to this evil outlook where money is number one and everything runs by money, and so everything is run by bankers, and so everything is run by usury, loaning money at interest, and then worse than that, fractional reserve banking, and then worse than that, derivative banking, and then worse than that, you get high frequency trades, which they don't even produce down the line temporary bubble income, like derivatives at least. Derivatives, when you sell them, your bank just showed a big profit. The guy who sold them made a big bonus. He goes home and buys his wife a new car, and it takes his family on a trip to Mexico or Hawaii. So they spend some of that temporary electronic money that's going to come back later and destroy the economy. But for now, in the moment that they're selling the derivative, the bubble is just blowing up a little more, and the bank makes more money, so their stockholders, the ultra-rich, get even ultra-richer for a moment. And like I say, the broker that sold the toxic stock, he made a bonus and got to buy more stuff in the economy, so that added a little fake money to the economy. And then down the line, of course, who he sold the derivative to was somebody that get to add it as an asset in their portfolio. So they just made some fake money. So they get to distribute some of that fake money amongst the people in their portfolio who just bought a toxic asset rated as AAA. And so that derivative bubble money gets to trickle down to someone, say, in Germany where they bought it, or someone off in, some little island somewhere where a trust fund where they put their retirement money. And now it just looks like, woo-hoo, honey, our retirement fund, we just got a little dividend from that wonderful derivative asset we bought from J.P. Morgan, right? Okay, so that all is beautiful, right? Well, of course, once the bubble pops, oops, honey, I guess we're not going on vacation this year. Oops, honey, I guess we're giving the car back. Oops, honey, price of everything just went up for everybody, and jobs just fell out of the market because all that fake money didn't really exist, and now people have to answer for it. So the derivative market at least had the temporary bubble reaction of pretending there's more money. But these high frequency trades are literally just padding the bank's momentary bottom line for a second. They're creating a pretend revenue stream that can be shown now on analysis for GP, the gross national product and such for our whole nation. Oh, look at that. In June, our GDP went up 0.7%. Yeah, because for 3 milliseconds at the end of June, the banks in their high frequency trade were able to show on their balance sheet that they had all this money sitting in their accounts. Holy mackerel. What it didn't show is a millisecond after, when July started, that money went back out into high frequency trading, and now all of a sudden they don't have that money on it's all just a fake, and it's as fake as it can be. So this has become the depth of it all, that starts way back at the idea that you're not even supposed to loan money at interest. All the sage advice, in fact, forbid loan money at interest, and the old Hebraic concept was that you would forgive loans every 7 years. If I loan you the money, for something, well, I probably am not making a contract any longer than 7 years, because the law says I have to forgive the balance in the end of 7 years. So I'm looking at your ability to repay me within 7 years. And if you're going to be a schmuck about it and hold off and not repay me, well, there's nothing I can do but be smarter the next time and not loan to a schmuck like you. But I can't hang on to that money and pretend you still owe it or anything else. Law said I had to give it back money I couldn't collect interest on to begin with. So why would you even loan money? Well, because it's the right thing to do. It keeps the economy in every sense in the society growing. If my neighbor needs a little money to buy a piece of equipment so he can farm his plot of land, well, he's going to grow peaches when I grow apples. Well, now I've got peaches to eat when his peaches come in. All because I loaned him a few bucks for his farm equipment, which when the peaches come in, theoretically, he could pay me back in peaches. So it's good for everybody for me to loan him that money, whether it's got interest attached or not. That's the original idea. But if in the end, I don't know, a worm ruined his crop, a flood happened to go through his land, he didn't get the peaches he thought he was going to, and 7 years later, guy isn't able to repay me the money or doesn't want to. Well, the law said, no, I got to write that off. Start over on another. So money lending was never meant to be the core of socioeconomic society, right? It was never meant to be at the core of our society. Banks and money and financial products should not at all be leading our economy. They should practically be one of those quaint things like the post office that just runs like a little clock because it supports everyone, rich and poor. It's just one of those systems, institutions in place that all of humanity agrees to put the energy into supporting for the sake of all humanity. Not a business to enslave mankind, which of course is what they've demonstrated the history of money to be from the time that Rothschilds first cornered the British central bank after Napoleon lost the war. And he was able to buy up 98% of the British central bank, and was quoted as saying, I don't care which scoundrels they elect to run the government, give me control of its money supply, and I don't care who writes the laws. I've got control. So, that's always been the way. And that goes against Christian scripture, Hebraic scripture, Hindu scripture, Buddhist scripture, anybody's scripture. Everybody knew. You don't loan money at interest. You don't base your society on that. That's going to ruin you. And so, why are we where we're at? Well, we started off loaning money at interest. Then we turned that into fractional reserve banking that essentially controlled the governments, that then were separated from their religious beliefs whatsoever, which is to say, separated from any moral, ethical authority. That's all it means. Nobody gives a crud whether God said it or not. What they care about is, am I limited in my ability to steal money by you pointing out that it's not right? That there's some higher authority of any kind, call it morality instead of God, something there to tell me I can't, in fact, use my money as a lever to get more from people. Well, that's in fact what every sage said. So yes, that would be considered immoral, unethical. We shouldn't allow it as human beings, and yet it's not only at the center of our society, but it's certainly at the center of the military-industrial complexes, at the center of the Zionistic movement of Israel and all the military establishment of Israel that's kept it in that land as an occupier. It's at the center of all of the problems in the Middle East today with regards to all these seemingly local uprisings and civil wars, Al-Qaeda here and ISIS here and Sunnis and Shias. All of this is funded by this same banking system that is in fact the power system of the West. And this is what true Islam is trying to stand in the way of. Any of those actual religious people, and even on a secular level, the business people of China and Russia, at least the way it's being presented. I don't know how to buy that, since they borrow money from the Bolsheviks were set up by the same central bankers. Stalin was installed by the same central bankers in the 50s. What makes you think those people aren't in charge of Russian politics every bit as much as they're in charge of American and European politics? They have to be. So Russia's having its strings pulled, just like it was in 1984. It's being told, rattle your saber, show off your weaponry, yeah, build some more, yeah, tax the people, yeah, get with China, make a deal, yeah, that's right, put the pressure on. I don't think that's being done in a real sense. That's a wag the dog, I believe. I think the only people left, which is why the war is against them, the only people left are the Orthodox Muslims. They've just, how do you, put flesh and blood on it. How do you stop a real people who's been living a theocracy for 1,000 years? Who has been purposely not following money, lending money at interest, drinking and getting drunk, bowing to their God, keeping their holy days, their hijab, their walk to Mecca. These are people that have been living what we only give lip service to in our culture for hundreds of years. And so these are the people I think that have to be destroyed in this bigger picture of secularizing the world, getting everybody on a secular money system of central banking that essentially enslaves mankind. How do you enslave mankind without the people who are willing to die for it saying, no, I'm not going to do it, I'll die for that, like Gandhi? Well, you kill them. I mean, right? Yeah. Because otherwise, see, if there's too many of them, we know from history it doesn't matter what kind of puppet government you set up, the people will overrun it. So you have to kill the people and then set up the puppet government with so few left. I believe that's what's been going on in Afghanistan all these years, and why it took so many years, just like it took so many years for the Bolshevik Revolution to truly be successful. It took them 60 years or more to systematically kill every possible Orthodox Christian expression in that country, every institution, church, every real expression that could gain a footing and become something through a grassroots. You couldn't have enough of them. It's like the Philadelphian church at the end times. It's got to be just little strength. Somebody that cannot really propose a threat to the establishment. That's the ultimate goal. Rockefeller said it 100 years ago. The only thing I fear is competition. That's the only thing to fear. Someone else comes along, something like me, and now I've got true competition. So
work for a living now.
Well, or lose your place. Not just work for a living, be out. Be where I've got everybody else on the outside looking in. Only places to be on the inside with no competition. So once you get these regimes in place, they have to be, uncontested. And that's what's gone on in the Middle East that hasn't gone on in so many other places. We were able to keep South America down. We were able to keep Central America down. We were able to keep Indochina down, right? Able to give them bread and circus and whatever else they required to keep them down. No more uprising of the people, getting together, becoming something that could threaten the status quo that we have, that we pay for, that the banks, when I say we, of course, I don't mean American people. I mean, because I'm American, the U.S. government, Washington, D.C., the private country of Washington, D.C., which exists solely for the purpose of being the militaristic political arm of the of the money, which exists in London, the other country state, and the Vatican over there in Rome, who imagines themselves a religious expression, but come on, what kind of God uses military and money? I mean, that's Jesus. I mean, come on. It's so absurd that anything coming from the Church of Rome in the way of their military economic strength could be considered Christian at all. Jesus specifically said, he specifically sent his people out with no money. He himself had no money, and he denounced all those Pharisees and their money. Said the only thing that was good for is sharing it, not keeping your eyes on it. Harder for a rich man to get into heaven than a camel to get through the eye of a needle. So all that richness and military might is purely anti-Christian. It is the Antichrist. It's the spirit of false Messiah, false deliverer. The deliverer of this world is the deliverer of munitions, the power of munitions and money, right? So that's why Christians say, oh, America's the Antichrist, because they're the Babylon system, no doubt about it. They represent that Babylon system of money. But that's not America, the flag. That's America, Washington, D.C., the city-state. Not Utah and Wyoming and California and New Mexico and the people of Nevada. No, the people of Nevada don't necessarily agree to any of this or understand any of it. No, that's Washington, D.C., the city-state, funded by the banks in the UK and the Vatican, who run the world, of the military might. And so they're bringing about a war against the Orthodox Muslims. World War III, they outlined it 100 years ago. And so that's what I see, Dad, going on right now, is that the Middle East is being set up for that. And from the eschatological point of view of the Muslims, this fall of the stability of Syria is going to pave the way for a Sunni-Shia civil war, which is what paves the way for this all-out UN necessity to go in and clean house and start setting up UN-approved secular, authorities to keep for the good of everyone.
Well, thank you, Tony. That's another very intelligent outlook and analysis of what we have going on in the Middle East today. The other thing I think, folks, we should keep watching, excuse me, tomorrow is that referendum vote in Greece. And what's going on there, of course, is the Greek people who were loaned $500 billion by the banksters into an economy that produces oil, olive oil, a few ships, and mostly relies on tourism, who could never repay a loan of that size in any way, shape, or form, is forfeited on the loan. And they want out of the euro. They want out of the European Union. The only way to save their country is to go back on the drachma and get off of the euro because they owe too many euros. And they've been paying 14% interest on that for about 11 years. So actually the money is paid back. It's the interest that isn't paid. I mean, after all, you can compound with compound interest. 8% will double your original investment in 7 years. So they've more than paid back the money, and now they want out. And the people of Greece are really practicing their democracy. The government gave them the right to choose. Do we stay in or do we get out? So there's a up and down, yes and no vote. And it comes off tomorrow, and it's a very close thing. Many of the people of Greece want it to go just the way it is and leave that debt and their broken banks and everything the way it is. and the other ones wanted to stop. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because the fate of NATO and the fate of the European Union, I think, really hangs in the balance, because there are other countries that are starting to not be able to pay their loans. Like in America, we have Puerto Rico. And
yeah, let me say something to you about that I've been paying attention to. I don't. This is all orchestrated.
Oh, of course it's orchestrated.
I mean, so it's not that they could easily do with Greece something else by simply, it's all electronic debt. It's meaningless.
I know. All they have to do is forgive it.
Wait a minute. So what the central banks, you have to get to what's going on. The central banks, this is outside of what's going on in the Middle East. This is simply how the central banks are continuing to steal money and resources around the world. They give a country debt that it cannot repay. The U.S. military, NATO, helps foment whatever revolutions are necessary in the country to put the right authority in place to say yes to the debt, so that the country, the people, get locked into a debt they would have never taken on if there were such a thing as democracy in the country. That's all being shown so that we can pretend they brought it on themselves, they voted for this. No, who funds all these things? Look at your history. We don't allow people to do their own thing. Imagine if that happened. That's not how the Eurozone was created. It was all created to bring them in, that the central bankers might eventually pop that bubble and divide up Europe and get all the European. I mean, think what the Leaning Tower of Pisa is worth if you owned it as an income instead of the Italian people owning it as an income for their country. Think of what these ports that the cruise ships go into Greece are worth to the people of Greece, instead of to someone like George Soros or some J.P. Morgan, right? So if you're J.P. Morgan, you're already owning everything. Well, wait a minute, I'd like to own Greece. How do you do that? They owe me, they owe us billions and billions and no, and we're not going to write it off. But I'll take that port. I'll take the Leaning Tower. I'll take the Mona Lisa. I'll take the Louvre. I'll take the, right? This is what's going on already in our country. This is what's going on already in Greece. This is what's going on. This is simply the method, like high frequency trading. It's just another financial product. Oh, I saddle a country with debt, and when they can't repay, I take their assets, where what I gave them was an electronic number on a computer that I never put a dollar into. The dollars I put into are to that military that says, you don't get to say no to my deal. So that's what's really going on with Greece. They're just being played like a piano in front of the world over it. But what's really happening is they're being put in a position that one way or another, they're losing their national resources to the people they owe the money to. Whether they stay in, whether they go out. This is all put up like the Republican Democratic convention, so everybody has something to talk about and pretend they're making their own decision. No, they're not. Either way, they decide they're screwed 6 weeks from Tuesday. If Russia comes and helps them, well, they just sold it all to Russia. Now they own the paper. If the IMF comes and bails them out, now we're going to take this for it. Either way, what it shows is you guys are on bankruptcy row, which means you just lost more. In other words, we won. It worked. We saddled you with so much debt that now even the pretense of you pretending is no longer there. Your country just lost some assets. Let's all decide what it's going to be, shall we? How you guys want to pay for this? So yeah, let's let them argue in the press. How the fact is, anything less than writing it off and accusing the people who gave them the debt as criminals, both within their own government who signed off on it and the international bankers who foisted it on those people, all that needs to be. I mean, if you're going to do anything like Iceland did, why do you think you don't hear about Iceland? Because they literally said, come into our country again, we'll chop your heads off. They jailed the bankers. They wrote the debt off and said, that was illegal. We don't owe you anything. Goodbye. And yeah, so what do they get? Well, they don't get any benefits. Nobody talks about Iceland. There's no pro-Iceland stuff going on anywhere. You just don't hear about them because what? They're over there growing themselves back. They're a small enough place. And there's not enough investment opportunity that the rest of the world cares to put them on the spot like Greece, right? But even if Greece were to do that, the problem is Greece needs to borrow from somebody to continue to develop their own GNP. They can't keep the olive oil business going if somebody doesn't help them pay for all those employees that right now won't have a bank to go to. If you just say, screw you, IMF, oh yeah, well then they're going to foreclose on you, sue you. Yeah, they're going to put the screws to Greece. So who's going to jump in and pay those penalties? Well, Russia's saying, well, maybe we'll do it. Yeah, we'll support Greece. Okay, fine. That just means that the bankers get it through Russia instead of through the IMF. See what I mean? So either way, what I'm seeing right now is it's all part of this end time scenario where they're using the upcoming war to cover up all of the banking scandals where they're stealing from the world right now. They're stealing from Greece. They're going to steal from Italy. They're going to steal from all these countries. All this austerity. As long as they can get the government that they've supported to keep pushing the austerity, oh, you bet, we'll keep squeezing the turnip. Not hurting us. You're not going anywhere. And the debt just keeps growing. Right? So perfect. The minute your people freak out and rebel and say, we're not paying this anymore. Okay, well, we'll go to plan B. Sure, let's let you do what you want. Yeah, what do you want to do? Want to default? No problem. The world court will decide what to do with you financially. We'll decide how to extract our losses from you. But what, you think you're just going to walk away like Iceland? Not if you're Italy. No way. No way. Not if you're Greece. You can start giving up cruise ship ports and islands, different stuff. So, yeah, that's the real thing, with what's going on in Greece, I think, Dad, and why people should not get fooled into thinking that any of the stories on the surface are at you. Until you hear these people talk about the string pullers. Who's funding the central banks? What is Russia's play all about, and who's funding them? Why are they willing to go buy up the Greek debt and take that on? See? Because they're being pushed in the same direction to create this war that has to come. There has to be an antithesis. It can't all be thesis. Otherwise, we could go in and fix everything. Okay, let's just structure it with the assets people do have and the money that's there. Let's just structure a deal since there's no competition. But no, you have to own the competition too. So now Russia is our great enemy, and China right now threatening to break our economy because that scares the crud out of Americans. My house will drop in value, right? I'm already scared to death. The banks are going to seize my money. Well, go kill those Chinamen if that's what it takes, right? Everything's to bring us to war right now. Nobody talks about peace. Nobody talks about, geez, it'll cost us all a lot more to war over all this when all we're really discussing is bits of electronic transactions. Nobody's out any gold here, people. The oil's going to come out of the ground for the next 100 years, so we could really write all this stuff off over 100 years of people's oil taxes and things like that as they consume oil, which is the petrodollar standard. If we really wanted to apply solutions, we don't have to be building military equipment right now and talking about warmongering on every mainstream media, except that's what they are talking. Why? Because they're preparing us for what's coming. We have to be ready for the fact that when they say we have to go to war, China's doing this, all the brainwashed Americans start nodding their heads. Yep, that's China. They knew it. They were going to attack us. They've been telling us. We were going to have to go to war with China. Now it's come. Right? So I think that's the problem, is they're using Greece as just one more tool in this chain of events to show the dreadful nature of the collapsing economy. So they keep comparing it to when it happens to America, because it's bound to happen here. I keep hearing
it's
that.
dreadful what they're doing to those poor people.
Well, the whole austerity thing, we've been saying it for years
well, they
now.
only get to withdraw from their account 60 euros a day.
Can you imagine? I mean, why wouldn't you have an absolute revolution when you know the bankers have been collecting millions of dollars and living like kings, that they've gotten you into this position through fraud, abuse, and scandal, and you mean you're going to just go, well, okay, honey, I guess the government says we can only take $60. You're going to put up with that? Holy mackerel. Now they know they got you under control. The whole country should be literally just knocking the banks over. You know what I mean? Knocking buildings over like a swarm of locusts moving forward. I mean, what else? To say, no. And you're not going to jail us, and you're not going to spray us with pepper spray, and you're not going to shoot us, because everybody's here. Nobody will accept that. Nobody. You know, but this to me is a real sign of the end of time, when not only will they accept it, but they talk about it on the news like it's just, yes, and in Greece today, instead of, holy crap, this is, you know, I'm afraid to even say this on the air, because millions of people are going to be marching on our banks tomorrow. Nah, they got us nodding to their tune while they're stealing all the wealth of the world and setting up a great war in order to justify it, pay for it, reconcile it into their books through war, right? War all of a sudden gives them all these new write-offs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, a lot of things get, just like 9/11, boy, the plane flew into the Pentagon, and all of a sudden, what was it, 2.3 trillion that Rumsfeld lost the day before? On September 10th, they announced, we've lost, like $2.5 trillion. Basic accounting fraud. I don't know. We can't find it, but we're working on it. And then 9/11 happens to be the plane flies into that exact spot in the building. And, well, I've never heard that mentioned again. Are we on the track? Are we holding anyone responsible for the $2.5 trillion? Oh, that just disappears from the public fund. Doesn't get cut off our military budget. We don't dock all the senior officials that should have been held responsible, at least some pay for the rest of their life to contribute back to that for screwing that up. No, just lost from the public fund. We just lost another couple trillion, I understand. So it's funny how false flags always follow that, because it takes your mind off the fact that you were just stolen from. While they're telling you there's no jobs, while they're telling you food keeps going up, while they're telling you rents keep going up, there's nothing we can do, austerity for everyone. They keep losing trillions of dollars, which would be very helpful right now in, keeping systems going. Anyway, sorry, I just felt that needed to be said.
Okay, thank you again, Tony. Well, folks, the way this word keeps coming to you is through your frankincense offerings. And if this is a storehouse where you get your meat, then you do what the Lord says to do. You give to the storehouse where you get your meat. You do it with hilarity and joy. That's frankincense. And if this is a storehouse, then stand up and cheer loudly, because it's offering time. We appreciate those offerings, and it keeps us coming to you. And until we see you again next week, for Tony.